Yes.
Actually, next year, we're going to have 12 sessions on technology for the program. Anyway, it's a delight to be able to introduce our speaker. I'm not going to make a long introduction because one, we'd rather hear her speak than me. And second is that all of us know her. She has spoken at our seminars. We have all read her books. She has been nominated for the Edgar Award. She has won the Agatha Award. She has won the Mary Higgins Clark Award. And she has her latest book out, The Death of Us, which I just recently purchased a signed copy of. So without any more introduction, because none's necessary, Lori Rader-Day.
Thank you so much, Steve. When he says recently, he means literally in the back of the room right before we walked up here. So no reverb, recording. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. You left out, I'm a member of this chapter. I'm a former national president of Sisters in Crime. You may genuflect at any time. How am I doing? Just want to see more of me? Are you sure? Are you still fine? Okay. Former national president of Sisters in Crime. I'm a member in Chicagoland, where I live. And of course, I'm a member here because this is where I am from. I'm from Boone County, represent Boone County, Indiana. Place where you can get speeding tickets really, really easily. And I'm happy to be here. So I am going to be talking about, I have a presentation called Liars and Thieves, and these are the good guys. How to create conflict-driven characters people still want to read. Everybody can hear me online, I'm assuming, or they'd be complaining, right? You would see the chat if they're great. And questions, yes, questions, is it in the chat or in the Q&A? Chat, looks like. Okay, okay, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Hawthorne. Hi, Hawthorne. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat. If it's relevant, I would be happy to answer it during the talk. If it's something that's maybe for the end, that's also fine. And in the room, you guys can just raise your hand if it's a relevant question right now or at the end. We're gonna have plenty of time for questions at the end. And I will take questions on any writing, publishing, possibly personal topic. So we'll have plenty of time to talk at the end. Okay, so fiction readers have long had a crush on the nasty protagonist. Consider Humpert from Nabokov's Lolita. Raskolnikov, I can't say that. 16 credits of Russian, people. 16 credits of Russian, and I can't get that out. From Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. Both Heathcliff and Kathy, this is my theory, from Wuthering Heights. I think Emily Bronte, her romance features, you know, two jerks who deserve one another. Go ahead, have at it. Plus two jerks who deserve each other. Does that sound like any book that was really popular in the last 10 years? I think Kathy might be like the original Gone Girl, who is not gone enough. And beyond the classics, we've seen a rise of the anti-hero in like the serial killer in Dexter, in drug kingpins and mobsters taking over big TV shows, really popular TV shows, Breaking Bad, The Sopranos, Boardwalk Empire, and then in huge bestsellers, starring vengeful girls with dragon tattoos and blind drunks on trains. Have you read any of those Colleen Hoover books? Those are bad boyfriends, okay? Everybody in that book is a bad boyfriend. So many books about people, facing down hard truths about themselves, and not often rising to the occasion. And that's just the made up stories. We're not going to get started on the news. So we're going to talk today about the why and then the how of unlikable characters. And mostly when I'm saying unlikable characters, I mean protagonists. You can use this information to write a nasty secondary character, obviously. But I think protagonists do so much work for our stories that it's a little trickier to get away with writing an unlikable protagonist. So you can use it for any level. You may balk at the idea of writing an unlikable character, but there are some, outside of the villain, obviously the villain, but there are some benefits, and we'll talk in a little while about why you might choose to write an unlikable character and why it's okay to do it. And I'll share some examples with you, some of which you've heard of and maybe some that you haven't, some things to try. And then I am always soliciting other examples that I can add to this talk next time. So, and we'll talk pros and cons all the way through. Okay, so first, story time. Why am I interested in the hard to like protagonist? I'm so totally likable. You all love me already. So my first book, The Black Hour, came out in 2014, and it had a protagonist who I liked her just fine. But when it was published, sometimes readers would come up to me and be like, oh yeah, she's a little rough. She's a little rough. I'm like, oh, really? I like her. She's a lot like me. You know, inside, because we're all like creating characters that we're like digging deep into ourselves to find things to write for our characters. And she didn't seem terrible to me. She had been shot and she was cranky, and I thought she deserved to be a little cranky. Like her life was passing her by and this was not her fault, and she didn't know why this had happened to her. I thought she's allowed to be a little bit miffed. So when I was getting ready to start promoting that book, I got a chance to go to an event in New York City. First book, go to New York City. It was like, yes, it was great. It was a book expo, BEA, I think is what they used to call it. They don't have it anymore, unfortunately. What is it? ABA is booksellers. This is BEA, and they don't have it anymore, but it was huge. It was in the Javits Center. I mean, filled out the Javits Center, book people from miles. And all the celebrity book, writers were always there. I walked past Neil Patrick Harris signing books once. I was like, oh yeah, I know. Oh yeah, I know that guy. Okay. So it's a big deal. And I was doing this is kind of like my first bookish thing, and my book's coming out soon. And I got to meet the guy who buys mysteries for Barnes and Noble nationally. We're friends now, whatever. And people like that. And then I also was meeting the people who were publishing my book for the first time. So this is a small press. They had scraped their pennies together and had this little booth at BEA. It was a big deal for them, and they had me there. And I met the marketing team, that kind of thing. And then I also met the guy who owned the company. He was just one of those boat shoe guys. I'm sure he had a yacht somewhere. I was not paid yacht advances, just FYI. But he was really nice. He was very, he seemed very approachable, everyone's talking to him, but he was a little shy around me. And I didn't know, I'm like, what? When he met me, he was almost he couldn't look at me in the eye. I'm like, what's happening? And the VP of marketing said, oh, that's because he's reading your book right now. And he has a little bit of a crush on your protagonist, but he's also a little afraid of her. And I'm like, okay. He knows it's not me, right? It's not actually me. Maybe I borrowed some me, but it's not actually me. So here's the one danger about writing an unlikable protagonist. Your readers will kind of assume that it's you a little bit. So there's your first con. But so let's talk about what makes a character likable. Why do you think a reader would choose a likable narrator for a story rather than an unlikable one? Does anybody have any thoughts on it? Relatable? Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You do things that you would like to do, but you're the other person.
That's an unlikable person, right? Why why is a likable protagonist even a thing, is my question. Like, why is that important? I think it's the relatable thing. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so they want to see the best. I'm going to repeat in case they can't hear. Relatable was one of the things we had. It reflects maybe who they are and society as a whole. Yeah, Diana. You want your reader to root some. Okay, many readers want to root for somebody in the books they read, right? Okay, Janet.
Well, spending a lot of time with this character, and you want to spend time with people that like.
They're spending a lot of time, it takes several hours at least to read a book. So you want to spend time with people you like. Yes. 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 Going back to the real life, there's a lot of unlikable in the real world. So if we're reading to escape, why hang out with somebody who's going to remind us of the worst of our society? I think the aspect of the relating part, it all comes back to like, who do you want to be as a reader, right? You sort of are projecting some things into and then back out of what you're reading. So we like likable characters because in fiction, as readers, toilet. It's the toilet flushing next door. Oh, charming. As readers, we are living the experience of the character in the book, usually the main character, or anyone who is telling the story. Sometimes you have more than one person, right? So I talk about brain science quite a bit when I talk about writing. So some of you may have heard me talk. I'm going to do it very quickly. So brain science, you didn't know you're going to get brain science today, did you? Brain science has proven that when readers are connected to a story, their brains light up in a way that tells us that reading is not that different from doing. So someone talks about a smell in the book, our brain smells it. Our nose doesn't, but our brain does, right? And so when your character is doing things and we as readers are very, very connected to that story and we're living that experience, it's almost like our brain is really doing those things, even though we are not physically doing those things. It's a really interesting thing that is kind of hard to get your brain around. But I love thinking about it because your readers are experiencing the life of your protagonist as though they are living that life. And I think that's a big deal. And also, it's going to happen a lot, isn't it? A big deal, but also a big opportunity for us as writers. Like, what experience do we want to give to our readers? We can actually place them in places that we want them to go. So when a character is likable and easy to understand, we don't have any trouble putting ourselves in that place. There's no barrier that we don't mind living that life, right? Because it's not, even if there's a little danger, even if there's a little adventure, it's not a bad life. It's not a bad soul that we are slipping into. Some readers, whether they would admit it or not, would rather hold an unlikable character at arm's length. They don't want to live any life that is not maybe as good as theirs or as troubled as theirs, or they sometimes want danger, but they will keep that sort of thing is not what I want to experience. I don't want to live that life. Even though we are putting our readers into lives, we're trying to expand their lives, we're trying to expand their world. Mostly the human first inclination is to reach for what is comfortable. We just all kind of do it. Likable characters engage our empathy, so that connection is very immediate. Unlikable characters may never do that, not until the end, not even at the end of the book. They may engage our sympathy or our pity. They might actually invite our disgust. And they might make us question what we believe and what we'd be willing to do. We're going to talk a little bit about that when I'm going to give you some examples later of what I mean by that. So have you heard the reality TV saying, we are not here to make friends? Some readers are reading to make friends. They are filling a void in their life that we can never know. We never know who's going to pick up our books and what they need and what they're looking for. And you can't control it. they're just going to pick up a book where they are, and we have to write the stories that we want to tell and hope that some of those readers are looking for what we are providing. We can't control it. We can't change it. Humans read for many, many individual reasons. But at least some of the reasons we read can be achieved through characters we wouldn't be friends with in real life. So there are reasons to do it anyway. When we write, we have to think about reader experience, not our experience of writing the work, but who is going to encounter the story and what they're going to learn and take away and feel and react and live. And then we also have to consider reader expectations. I don't talk about writing rules ever. I try not to use that word. I talk about reader expectations, because when people pick up a book that looks like mine, blatant self-promotion, they're not picking it up to feel comfortable, right? There are things on the outside of this book, text on the back, dark, foreboding art on the cover, that will alert readers, oh, I actually may not feel comfortable when I'm reading that book. And that's okay, because people who want to feel that way have been alerted, right? That's what marketing, that's what the marketing team is thinking about when they're thinking about your book cover, jacket, and then what it says on the back, like what do we give away, what do we withhold? I even have to think about like my picture on my book. You'll see that it's an old picture where I have brown, nay, I say almost blonde hair. Had a little bout with breast cancer between my last book and this one. I'm doing great. It's going to be fine. I'm 2 years out. But on the new book, oh, look at that. She looks different. So, but that's a marketing thing, because I didn't want to put necessarily a silver-haired person on this book in particular. I wasn't quite ready for that. That's my own issue. It's my own baggage, but we all have it. Okay. But when you're thinking about reader expectations, you don't have to follow along with those things. You can actually subvert them. You can play with them. You can engage them, and then without the carpet from underneath their feet, or you can give that experience if that's what you want to do. So we are having a little bit of a renaissance of the dark, or we were having a renaissance of the dark hero, anti-hero. I'm not exactly sure where we are right now. For a while there, you know, a lot of the TV shows, a lot of the books it was just gung-ho, dark stories. With the pandemic lockdown, we did see, I think, some yanking back of that, a little bit more comfort reading, a lot more comfort reading. I don't know about you, but I read like Charlotte's Web again. Why not? Like Agatha Christie sold a lot of books because her books are known quantity and comforting, not always pretty. Hey, back off with the predictable, Janet, like Agatha Christie. But you know that there's going to be justice served in one of her books, right? Not all mysteries serve justice by the end. Most of them do, some of them do not. We can talk about that at the end if anybody's interested. But here's what I have to say about trends. Even if there still is, I'm not sure where we are at the moment. It changes. You can't write to a trend, right? If you started writing today to a trend that you saw, you'd be 3 years too late. That's just how trends are. So you can't write to them, and you wouldn't want to, because you want to write the stories that you want to write. You don't want to look at something and say, okay, that person, that book, that's popular. There's no point to that. Writing is too much work. It takes up too much time. It is too hard to do it any way but the way that you want to do it. So screw the trends. And there's always room on the shelf for a nasty protagonist and for a villain. So, you know, if you don't want to do a nasty protagonist, you can always do a really good villain. But let's talk about, if your hard to like character is the protagonist, that requires a little more thought. So why do we enjoy unlikable or hard to like characters? Stephen, you said?
Because they do things you'd like to do.
Because they do things that you might like to do. Exactly. I don't know your name. I'm sorry. John.
Yeah. I want to back on.
Okay.
Living vicariously.
Yes.
Two things that you normally wouldn't do, but also seeing the baser attributes of a person full front and center.
Yeah.
Laying out that person's flaw, making them someone who maybe you don't like, but is very honest about who they are.
Okay.
Because, my experiences with a lot of people are, you aren't always honest with who you are, specifically in public situations.
Yeah.
So getting deeper, you're able to get.
And
deeper
you, as a reader, you enjoy that,
Yeah.
like seeing the person like flayed open to like their basis.
Yeah, and having an
Urges.
understanding why they're that way, why
Mhm.
they react that way, and how that influences who they are, and what they may or may not do throughout the course of the story.
I'm not sure how well you guys at home can hear John, but he, as a reader, he likes to see people sort of flayed open at their bases, and how they tick. Why might that make sense as a human action reaction? Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I'm not one of these people, but some people like.
Oh, Bridget. Some people like to see other people suffer, says a very nice person in this room. Okay. Anybody else? I think you're getting to it. Like what I think too is, so they aren't us. They're, you know, we can pick this book up or we can put it down. It's not us. It's not connected to us yet. And the characters, they get to break the rules that we might wish we could, or that we might think about breaking, and we can see how that pans out for them. They might get to say things. I mean, my characters always get the last, you know, they always get like that snappy comeback that I have to think about for 3 days, and then I come up with, and then I'm like, oh, I should have said, oh, I know what I should have said. But they have it because I revised it 8 times until they had it, right? So they get to say the things we want. These characters get to taste the forbidden fruit, and they swallow all the poison. So we don't have to do it. So that connection to the reader that I was talking about, it's there, and your brain is like, yeah, we get to do this stuff, but you don't actually have any of the repercussions, right? So one thing I want to say before we get going on the how is that there is a little bit of a gendered quality to this likable, unlikable issue. Guys may disagree with me, but it is gendered. Most male characters do not have to be likable. Now, some readers might like them better if they were, but it seems like it's a topic of conversation more for women writers than it is for male writers. And to prove that, I've got some quotes from a scuffle that happened a few years ago. Roxane Gay, who's an essayist, she's also a novelist, I think, and short story writer, wrote an essay for BuzzFeed. It says, and in part, writers are often told a character isn't likable as literary criticism, as if a character's likability is directly proportional to the quality of a novel's writing. This is particularly true for women in fiction. In literature, as in life, the rules are all too often different for girls. I think at the time there was a dust up about this woman, Claire Massoud, who's a literary writer. She wrote a book called The Woman Upstairs. And she was interviewed, and the interviewer asked her about, you know, her unlikable protagonist. And Claire was like, if you're reading to find friends, you're in deep trouble. I already told you, some readers do read to find friends. So I'm not fully in the camp of Claire Massoud. Not fully in the camp of Claire Massoud is my new band name. We read to find life in all its, this is still her talking. We read to find life in all its possibilities. The relevant question isn't, is this a potential friend for me? But is this character alive? I'm going to give her that one. Alive is better than likable, but. And then in response to that, author Jennifer Weiner, some of you may have heard of her, she's maybe a little more famous than Claire Massoud, wrote for Slate, and she said, what bothers me about this latest flare-up is that it feels like just one more way for literary women writers to dismiss commercially successful women writers. Uh-oh, now we're in it, right? It used to be a writer could turn up her nose at chick lit and say, oh, I don't read those books. I don't read books with that stuff on the cover, and I certainly don't write books like that. Ooh. Only now that nobody seems to quite sure what chick lit is. Remember chick lit? Like they don't even talk of women's fiction, book club fiction. That's what they call it now. Only now that nobody seems quite sure what chick lit is, and everyone has recognized that authors, especially female ones, don't always have control over how their books end up looking, a new code word is required. That word has become likable. Calling a novel's character the L word doesn't just imply that the author in question is writing like a girl. It hints that she is writing like the wrong kind of girl. A dumb, popular, easy girl. I love this stuff. Okay, in response to that, one more. Kelly Braffett, who is a novelist, and she wrote an essay for Salon, said, readers see themselves and the world around them in these characters, just like authors do, because we are readers. And the very notion that people will reject a book because they don't like the characters is condescending and dismissive. The world of books and the people who love them is bigger and wider and better than that. And I hope, Kelly, I hope you're right, because that's what I've been banking on all my career. Okay, so the world of books is bigger and wider, and can't we just all get along? Can't we all just write the books we want to write? Yes, that's what we're just gonna pretend that's entirely true. I don't know if it is, but let's hope. Okay, so that sounds like a problematic decision then. It's not just, oh, just try this. You might have to think about, like, am I losing the readers I already have? Is that something I'm risking? Am I risking something? Why bother then? Why ever use an unlikable protagonist? I have some reasons. Number one, they create conflict. I just read you like 3 essays, right? You might get talked about on social media because you've got these characters that are creating conflict. And obviously conflict is something we want on the page, every single page from what we hear. And then the opposite character, the character that never runs up against unexpected things or runs into conflict, that's a boring, tedious character, I think. Maybe there are readers who do enjoy that. There's a term for it. It's the Mary Sue. The Mary Sue character is a wish fulfillment character. If you ever read like a novel and you're like, oh, the character just wishes that they lived this life, right? I think of the Dragon Tattoo book, and that guy who wrote it, he's dead, right? Stieg Larsson. He absolutely wanted to live the life of his main character, having sex with every woman in that book, right? Like there was like some Mary Sue wish fulfillment going on there. But not every reader is going to like that choice either. The world of books is bigger and more complex than just the binary, right? So other reasons to write an unlikable character, they round out points of view in a multi-view story. You can actually have multiple characters, and maybe one of them has a view that you would absolutely never agree with yourself. They can do some really good work for a story to have someone like that. They reveal aspects of the human psyche. As John was saying, they make a story real, because some humans are tedious, terrible people. They embody themes you want to explore. There are things you want to say with your story. Okay, this is the kind of character I need. And they're usually much more interesting than a nice, normal person. I mean, nice, normal people, how many stories do they have? But the most important reason is an unlikable protagonist. The only reason to do it really is the unlikable protagonist is the best person to tell the story. When you choose your protagonist, that's what you're always looking at, right? Who is the best person in this situation? Who's going to see the most, be able to tell the most, who has the most interesting voice? All the reasons that you might pick any protagonist is exactly why you might pick a hard to like protagonist. Okay, so hard to like characters can be difficult in a lot of different ways though, right? There's no one way to be bad. So I've got some examples. Tom Ripley from Patricia Highsmith. Those are great books, and he's tough to like, right? Killing people. Kind of a con man to start with, and then doing away with some people. The other character that I think of when I think of this kind of character is, I don't remember his name. He's the sheriff who tells the story in The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson. It's a fantastic book in which you actually, you're listening to this guy just waste to this town, and you're like kind of on his side. Remember when I said you might have to like question what you who you are, yeah, that's the kind of character that you're like, oh, Tom Ripley, go, Tom. Wait a minute. Do I want a sociopath to get away with murdering people? No, right? But there was a second there. Mhm. Yeah, he's naming character the Corleones. Yeah, but you can't help but root for them, right? They're telling you the story, and they're out there adventuring and doing things. You're like, yeah, okay. Let me do a couple more, and then I'll take some suggestions. Vera Stanhope, the Anne Cleves series. Vera, she's not a sociopath as the ones I've been talking about, but she's kind of gruff and kind of mean to the people who work for her, and she's a great character. Claire DeWitt in the series by Sarah Gran. She steals drugs from people. Every time she walks into a new place, she goes to the bathroom and then she opens the drug cabinet and steals whatever's good. You know, Shirley Jackson characters. Are you any Shirley Jackson characters? Not just the ones that stone each other, like all of them. There's a series by Ellis Hilton that starts with a book called Maestra, and it's told by a sociopath, I would argue, who murders a couple people in the act of, you know, art theft. And then even recent smashes like Big Little Lies, like that sort of like mommy PTO group fighting that they do. Like a lot of the TV shows that are happening like right now, it's like all these kind of vaguely terrible people arguing. And then there was a book that was really popular a few years ago that was not a crime novel, but it was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It's the title of the book by Gail Honeyman. And I think it's a woman who's actually on the spectrum somewhere, the autism spectrum disorder. But she's kind of hard to connect with. She's kind of hard to like, but it was a huge smash. So how do we, you know, there's a reason to do this stuff. And then you had an example, John?
Yes. I have three.
Okay.
One is from television, which is Dexter.
Yep.
You understand a little bit of who he is, you know that he is taking very despicable people off the street, but the methods of how he does that is grisly and wrong. But you can't help but having a sense of empathy for him.
Yeah. Dexter
Another
is the example.
Is Olive Kitteridge. That
Yes.
character is the most unlikable character I've ever read.
Worse than Dexter. Olive Kitteridge is the other example John is giving us by Elizabeth Strout.
Felt so sorry. Also impressed that he had written this book that got me to thinking, you know, how I hate this central character, but how much I appreciate the stories of everyone around her.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the last is from comic books, but this is made it to novels, and the silver screen is The Punisher.
Punisher.
Frank Castle. This is a Marvel Comics created in the 70s. You see a Vietnam veteran whose family is murdered, and he takes a war on crime, much like the John Simmons series, Max Bowler.
That's a reference within a reference there,
Right.
sir. Okay.
And that is something where you don't like this character because of who he is. He's going out killing criminals, much like Dexter,
Okay.
but very much so out in the open. I mean, he's spraying, killing criminals, and he's indiscriminate about who he's killing. You know, if you commit a crime, you're dead type scenario, but you understand a little bit more why he is this way, because of how his family was murdered, and you have a little bit of empathy for him because of the circumstances that led him to this point, but you also realize that it's not a good person.
Okay, you're teaching the whole class for me. Because you just gave like 3 different things, and I'm going to talk about how to make a hard to like character.
Sorry.
That's okay. But great examples. Let me, so we had Corleones, we had Dexter, and we had The Punisher, is, you said Marvel, or it's from comic books.
Yeah.
whose situation has sort of brought him to be a killing machine. And then Olive Kitteridge, which is a literary fiction. It's based on a novel and story. So each story is like Olive is somewhere in it, but sometimes very distant and sometimes very central. It's by Elizabeth Strout. It's really good. Thank you, John. Stephen?
Still want some.
Yes, but quickly, so I have to recap.
Dave Robichaux novels, James Lee Burke.
Oh, the Robichaux novels by James Lee Burke. Okay.
Harry Bosch, sort of.
Harry Bosch.
Without the
Substance abuse, okay.
Then there's the Tom Hanks character from Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition, Tom Hanks's character. Is he the protagonist?
For the gang.
His son is the protagonist.
Sorry?
His son is the protagonist. The Tom Hanks character on Road to Perdition is not the protagonist, but we're going to get to why that works. Bernie Gunther. I don't know that one. Bernie Gunther.
Okay, yeah, right. Bernie Gunther is.
Philip Carr. Philip Carr.
Philip Carr.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Bernie Gunther series. Okay.
Player.
Somebody is.
Have you read it?
I have not. No.
Oh, it's very good.
We're getting some examples, and I think I'm getting most of them written down here, so we can maybe, if anybody is missing one, we can get them. What was the one you said, Stephen? Oh,
Dave Robichaux.
Robichaux.
Please Purcell is his sidekick. Also,
Okay.
any protagonist written by
Gillian
Gillian.
Flynn, my friend and sister. She's a sibling in Chicago. I made her one. Yeah, you're right. Yes, Gillian actually does write a lot of unlikable, hard to like protagonists. You're absolutely right. She's a really good example. Okay, so I think I got most of those. Okay, so from these examples, you can see that it's very possible to write a hard to like protagonist that readers will embrace. These are, Robichaux. These are characters we all know the names of. Gillian Flynn sold millions of books. There are ways around it. Now, because you're the person who has to make that connection between reader and character, it does make your job harder, but it's not impossible. So how do you do that? I have some tips. You knew I was going to have some tips. I have some tips, and I actually have 20 of them. If you're a note-taking person, now is the time to make sure your pen is writing. Okay. And as we go, if you think of an example that goes along with this, let me know. Okay, so number one, we're going to give them a glimmer of humanity. A glimmer of humanity. So just as you would for any character, you're going to dive deep into your unlikable character. And like John was saying for one of his examples, like get to the why. Don't just leave it on the surface. Get to the why. Find out what makes that character tick. What glimmer of humanity can you show the reader so that they can empathize with the character? What created this hard exterior? What is the backstory? Now, I always say that backstory is for chapter 2. Okay. Backstory is not something you want all the way up front. It's backstory. Find ways to deal it back in later on. But that's where it's useful, showing us who made this character this way, who hurt you, right, is the line that all the young ones say. But and I also think of there's a book called Save the Cat. You guys seen that one? It's a how-to for screenwriting, and then there's a how-to for novel, like Save the Cat writes a novel. I don't use them. I've heard they're really good, but the Save the Cat, that phrase comes from when you have a character that you need the viewers, because it's a screenwriting book, the viewers to connect to very quickly. You have that character do something very good. You have them save the cat, right? Or have them do something like that. So you can tell, oh, okay, it's not just all hardwood in there, right? There's more, there's humanity in there as well. And I think your example, John, actually fits that, right? Like he's a Vietnam vet. He's been through the wars, right? He's been through some stuff, and that's created this hard exterior. It's created this, the Punisher, he's created this character that's a killing machine. Does anybody have Another example of that you think of?
Let's see, I think it's called the I mean, he is saving the girl, but he's really very focused on that thing.
I like that one. I needed a better example, and that's a great one. The Professional, it's a movie. I don't know if it was based on a book. It might have been. It was a French movie first and then English language. But it has that plant he's got to take care of. Yeah. He won't let it go.
And actually,
You don't want to spoil a movie that's 30 years old?
well, okay, yeah, it's just at the end when she manages to survive, the girl does, and what she does is she plants the plant.
They save the plant by the end. They didn't save everybody, but they saved the plant by the end of the, okay, yes. That's a great example. Thank you. Okay, number 2, we can give them a frailty. Give them a frailty. So instead of that internal humanity thing, we might give them something that's actually kind of external. You can give them a moment of weakness that shows early on that their character isn't infallible, isn't all powerful. You can make the reader kind of worry about this character or be concerned for them. And that's, even if it's kind of, you know, ugh, it's a connection. That's a feeling that you have made someone feel for this character. So I have an example. Vera, not in the books, but in the show, her father has just died. And the very first episode of the very first season, she's got his ashes, and they had a very bad relationship. Father and daughter did not see eye to eye. It was not a great, and so she's got his ashes, but she loved him, but she also hated him. And so it's just like this problematic thing. And so she actually gets her sergeant, her second in command, to go dump his ashes for her. And so you can see, oh, there's a chink in that armor, right? And no matter what we know about her from then on, we have already seen what her Achilles is. It's a relationship with that. Another example is, you guys know the Flavia de Luce series by Alan Bradley. It's about a little girl. She starts out 11 years old, and she's got like a chemistry lab in her house. It's a whole thing, but she's kind of like too smart for her own good. She's not, I did not enjoy her the first time I read her. I get her now. Once I got her, now I enjoy the books. But at first I was like, who is this snotty little 11-year-old, right? Who makes poison in her chemistry lab in her house. Okay, sure. Well, early on, you watch her sisters being mean to her. It's also, she's 11, so she's not like a reliable narrator, right? She's kind of like outsized emotions for her little tiny body. So, but you can see her sisters being mean to her for no reason at all, just because she's the little sister. So it's like, oh, now I feel a little bit, she's going to try to poison them, so I don't feel that bad for her. But there's also a book I really liked. This is quite a few years ago, but it's called Galveston by Nick Pizzolatto, something like that. He has a main character who is like an enforcer for the mob. And you learn very quickly that he, like in the first paragraph, he's chasing a guy. He gets winded, kind of unexpected. He's a big guy, he's a strong guy, right? He's the enforcer for the mob, and he gets winded. And so his mob boss sends him to the doctor that he pays cash to, right? And our enforcer has lung cancer. Says it lights up, you know, on the screen like a snow flurry. And he doesn't have, there's no like, this is going to be fixed. This is his death sentence, right? So you learn very quickly he's going to die. He's got cancer. So what is he going to do? He's going to do whatever he wants, right? He's going to be a bad character because he's an enforcer for the mob. But yeah, he's got a chink in that armor. We might see something different from him that we haven't seen yet. Okay. Number 3, let them tell the story. Now we're talking about protagonists, so we really should be talking about characters that are always telling the story, right? But when you give a character their own voice, when you use first person to tell their story, that's kind of a shortcut to getting your reader really connected to that, your reader connected to that character. I was saying it right. So first person, let them tell. what their deal was. No one is the villain in their own story. I think you've probably heard that before. So let that jerk talk and think on the page until the reader has some understanding of their mindset and they understand what's going on. So one of my example from earlier, The Killer Inside Me by Jim Thompson, is a small town sheriff who's telling the story and you're just along for the ride. And he starts doing things. You're like, not 100% on board with that. Okay, and it turns out this is not a law following. It's not one of those law enforcing for himself sheriffs. This is a guy who's going to get into a lot of trouble. But you find yourself rooting for him. Why? Because he's the one who's taking me along this ride. I'm connected to him. There's really nobody else that I'm going to attach to. He's telling me I did this and I'm doing that, and you're going to root for him because that's just how it's going to go. A less murderous version of this is Christopher Boone is the main character of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is it's by Mark Haddon, Haddon. It's a great book. It's short little read. It's got little graphics and things in it. The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Highly recommend. It is kind of a detective story. It's kind of a crime story, but it's really kind of light, even though it's an odd little book, but absolutely deserves every award, every accolade. So the narrator of that book, he tells the story himself. So you've got that first person connection, but also he is on the autism spectrum. And so you actually get to see how his mind works on the page. How does he think about things? How does he take in information? There's the murder in the building, in the story is of a dog. I don't usually allow that sort of thing, personally. But handled well. And then he's going to find out who did it. That's the detective in him. He's going to figure out who did it. The thing is, for the reader, it's actually not that much of a mystery who did it. You will very quickly figure out who did it and why. But Christopher has that wall, right? He's at a distance a little bit from how we perceive things. And so it's a little bit harder for him to follow along. And it's fascinating. But that's because he's telling the story. You get this sort of really interesting experience. Yes.
Have you read Rubbernecker?
Have I read Rubbernecker? Who's that by?
It's really, really good, but it's an sort of adult version of the young man. It's not the same characters, but an adult version of somebody who has lots of issues with autism on the spectrum.
Okay. Another possible protagonist of
from his
Rubbernecker. Okay. It was another protagonist, adult, I think you're saying adult person with autism spectrum. There's another book, this is not a mystery, it's the Rosie Project, I think. Where, yeah, there's Rosie Project and then the Rosie, I can't remember the sequel. Yeah, and I think he's somewhere on the spectrum. I don't know if he actually knows that, but same kind of thing. He's telling the story, and so you can see the world from his perspective and how his reality works. And when you're doing that, you're immediately there. You're immediately going to buy whatever he's selling because he's getting to tell that story. Okay. Number 4, let them tell any story. Let them tell any story. So if you have a character that you want readers to understand, have them tell a story. Any story. It doesn't have to be their origin story. There's something about a reader giving you sort of a little bit of insight into them, even if it doesn't explain everything, that helps readers make a little room for that character. The story makes the character more real, more human, and worthy of empathy. So this is where your backstory is helpful, right? Like no matter what your backstory is, it might be helpful. I'm thinking of like when they talk about like hostage negotiators, like one of their tactics is to have the person who's being held hostage talks to the person holding them hostage. It humanizes them. It's the same kind of thing. We're just gonna humanize this character in whichever way we can, and by telling a story about their kids or their life. It works like that. So here's a Gillian Flynn example for you. Libby Day, no relation to me. Dark Places. Dark Places, that's my preferred Gillian Flynn. I like them all, but it was her second book. It was really good. And it's a character who has, she's the she's one of two survivors in a family massacre. The other survivor is her brother who's in prison for doing it, right? This is not a good story. But, you know, from the outside, you can kind of see where people are like, I don't know, but it's beautifully told. And by the end of the first chapter, you will be on her side. It's not told first person, it's told, oh, maybe it is. It is first person. So that helps. But also she's going to tell you the story. And then she's going to tell you another story. She's going to tell you another story. So she's just somebody who's going to engage you with stories. Stories always engage. Number 5, have them tell only part of the story. So you can have, if you have an unlikable protagonist, you can actually let them share the stage a little bit or a lot. And then readers can maybe rely on that character to connect to the story. They will definitely tell you which character they like best. Just a warning. Why do I know that? Because I do this a lot. And I don't know that I actually do it because I've got an unlikable protagonist and I need to spread that out a little bit. I just like stories where you get to see multiple perspectives. But the Black Hour I mentioned earlier had a character that was shot and injured and kind of cranky about it, rightly so. But I realized she also was going to be somebody who was not going to hop up and start investigating anything because she's harmed and still in a lot of pain. So I gave her another character to share the story with. She had already met the student on the stairs as she was coming in. And so I'm like, well, okay, what's that kid got to do? What's he got to, what does he have in him? So he ended up taking over half the book. So they share the book back and forth. Some of you read it. And I still hear from people who have read that book and they're like, well, she was a little, but oh, I really liked him. Okay, whatever got you to the end, whatever got you to the end, it's fine. For The Death of Us, blatant promotion. So I started out with a single narrator and then another narrator kind of wandered on the scene and I thought, well, he's interesting. Let's see what's going on there because he could see different angles to the story I needed to tell. But after writing for a while, I realized a lot of the action in the story, like the crime, had happened 15 years ago. Like a lot of the stuff I really needed to tell readers what happened and learn for myself, because that's how I write, happened 15 years ago. And that was tricky because while these people were alive 15 years ago, they weren't, one of them wasn't on the scene at all. And the other one couldn't know, or the work was going to be really, really short, right? So I put in another narrator who had seen things, who knew some things about 15 years ago, and the three of them together tell the story. So you can spread it out a little bit. And that helps, because if this person is too much for an entire book, well, then the readers have these other characters to look forward to and get them through. Number 6, make them active. But readers may not like your character, but I think what they like even less is a character that sits around. And if you are giving this character lots to do, there's stuff to watch, there's stuff to want to see how it turns out, then you've got something worth watching, no matter how we feel about this character on an emotional level. So so you make sure your unlikable character is at least the creator of some problems and conflict, actively unlikable, if you will. So I'm thinking of Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean. He's a pirate. I mean, pirates murder people. I mean, it should be a problematic character, right? There are a couple things going on with him, and we'll get to the other one in a second. But he's going to do stuff. He's in there, like, you know, being a trickster for all the things that other people in the story are trying to do. So active, active, active. Number 7, surround them with other compelling elements. need a better headline for that, but surround them with other compelling elements. And I'll tell you what I mean. So even if your reader is not going to root for this unlikable character ever, readers might come to enjoy other things about the story. So they might really enjoy the voice that you've given to this person. They might really enjoy your beautiful writing. They might really enjoy a setting where you have placed the story. There are other things that you can surround your characters with, so that you know, things, even if they go very, very dark, there are things to enjoy. The best example of this probably ever is Lolita. So Lolita, Humbert is terrible character. It's hard to read, and terrible character. He's hard to follow. You're not going to root for him. I don't think you can root for him. Maybe you can. But he's actively outrageously bad, and it's also beautifully written. If you haven't written it, it's worth just opening the front page and just seeing what I mean. It's beautifully, and if you read it out loud, you'll hear like all the work that Nabokov did to make sure that it was beautifully sounding as well. Like it's not an accident, any of that book. Okay, number 8. Allow their bad habits to help them. Allow their bad habits to help them. So maybe she's a bully or he's quick to anger, but what if those very traits that make them unlikable also help them do their job in the story? As we're all mystery writers, maybe it helps them detect, right? Maybe it makes them really good at spotting lies, or it helps them understand criminals in a way that you know, more saintly characters cannot. What if her selfishness helps her think just like a criminal and then catch them? I think that's one of the reasons I like Vera a lot. If you haven't seen the TV show, I love the TV show. The books are really good as well. But I came through the TV door, so that's probably why I reference the TV show more often. She's really good at what she does, and that helps offset some of that gruffness, right? She, even among the characters, you can kind of see them being like, oh, she's such a terrible boss. But, you know, she kind of gets the job done, doesn't she? So despite the rough personality of this character, people might come to have like a grudging respect for what's happening there. I'm making a transition here. What do you got?
You ever seen Martin?
Martin.
British TV show.
British TV show Martin. No, I have not.
Martin.
Oh, Dark Martin. I've heard of it. Doc Martin. Okay, Doc Martin. Is he gruff? Is he a hard to like character?
He's sort of-
Okay. Doc Martin, British TV show. Does he solve crimes?
No,
No.
not really.
Okay, he's not a mystery character. Okay. Okay, puts people off. Oh, I don't think they would. Because they don't get along with anybody, right? Yeah. But even despite, you know, these drawbacks, they might be really, really good at their job. And that's the sort of thing that Hercule Poirot enjoyed. It is the sort of thing that Sherlock Holmes enjoyed. These are insufferable characters, right? When you really think about what Sherlock, he's my example for a lot of things coming up here, because he's a very hard character. All the TV versions of him, he's a hard character to like, but they find different ways to make him palatable. Number 9 is to filter the character through another character's viewpoint. Filter the character through another character's viewpoint. Where we have Sherlock Holmes again, right? Sherlock Holmes stories are told by Dr. Watson, and that is not an accident. First of all, it would be very hard to spin out a story with a solution at the end if your detectives get into it within 2 seconds, right? So Dr. Watson is there to give everyone else time to catch up. But he's also there to sort of filter that Sherlock Holmes character, so we don't have to embody that character and feel a lot of empathy. We can just think, oh, he's really kind of terrible, but also really smart, and it's worth it. Number 10, show other characters liking your unlikable character. Show other characters liking your unlikable character. So your unlikable character can be redeemed simply by the fact that another character we like, that we do like, likes that person, right? They can't be all bad if so-and-so likes them, right? There's some kind of redeeming factor there that maybe we can't see it ourselves, but there's something there. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes again, right? Dr. Watson hangs with him. He gets frustrated with them, but he also, especially in like the BBC Sherlock and the elementary versions of it, you see actual friendships. And I think in the text, in the canon, you don't actually see that kind of thing as much. But the other example I have down here is there's a movie called Wonder Boy, the book, and a movie called Wonder Boys. The book is by Michael Chabon, really great. And Grady Tripp is the main character, and he's kind of going through like a crisis. I think he's divorced his wife, he's cheated on her, he's got a girlfriend, but now he might be cheating on her. And then there's this girl who lives in his house and she's flirting. It's a whole thing. Like, it might be Mary Sue, everybody wants to date me kind of character. But when you think about all those women who are kind of into Grady Tripp, okay, so there's got to be something there, right? There's got to be some kind of attraction there. It helps you smooth over until you can see more of him and understand him a little bit more. Okay, number 11, show the unlikable character loving someone else. So 10 was people loving him. This is him loving someone else. Love being the great equalizer. Your unlikable protagonist can't be a total lost cause if they love someone. It's a little bit like Save the Cat, right? There's something in there. There's a little glimmer of something. Heathcliff, I guess. I am not a fan of Wuthering Heights. You may have picked up by now. I had to read it twice in college. That guy nailed a puppy to the barn wall. Just a reminder if you haven't read it lately. But he loved Kathy so much, right? And that's why it's that dark romance that the teenager girls love so much, right? It's a little bit like Twilight. Twilight. That guy's a vampire. He wants to eat her. It's in the text. He wants to kill her and make her a vampire. And it's kind of rapey from what I hear. I haven't read it, but he's so in love, and that's what makes that an attractive character to some readers. Not to me. He's Heathcliff, basically. He's Heathcliff. All right, 12. Show off the character's flaws through humor. Show off the character's flaws through humor. So if a character can laugh at themselves, or you can make a reader laugh at a character, there's that connection again, right? It may not be, I can't like this character, but I can see that this is funny, and that's a connection. I can enjoy this character. And that is sometimes all you need. This is Jack Sparrow again, right? That's the other thing that he does that makes anything he does as a pirate, including, plundering and killing and whatever it is he might get up. It's a Disney movie, so they don't actually get to that part, but he's a pirate, right? He's funny. And that makes that connection instantly. Number 13. Lucky number 13. Allow them to act counter to their bad traits. Allow them to act counter to their bad traits. Try letting an unlikable character act in a way contrary to their bad traits. And it might be because they think no one's watching. Maybe no one's watching, maybe they think no one's watching. right? You're watching because you're the reader and you're the viewer. But let them try an occasional kindness. I think this is where the Sherlock Holmes, the newer TV versions, where they're different from the canon, where they don't redeem fully because they're still kind of jerks, but they start to make a friend and they do occasional kindnesses and they will do the right thing sometimes, even though it's hard. That kind of action is the toilet keeps flushing next door. If you're wondering why I'm like, wah, every few minutes. This is a very popular toilet.
We want to kill.
Someone is flushing the toilet a lot. Hope it's many people, not just one. Okay, number 14. Exaggerate their bad traits to a love to hate level. Exaggerate their bad traits to a love to hate level. I think this is Sherlock again, to be honest. Exaggerated traits stretch the limits of reality, but they sure can be fun to read and watch. And if you amp up the what will they do next, that's readers having a relationship with that character. What terrible, oh, there's no way they're going to get out of this. There's no way to know that this isn't going to stir up some trouble, right? But that's a relationship to the reader. And that is enough to connect with, even though we may be watching like with sort of cringing horror of what they're doing. Number 15, give the reader someone to hate more. Give the reader someone to hate more. There's probably a lot of examples of this. I actually have been watching the Elementary, that's the Sherlock version that was on CBS. And I love the BBC Sherlock. So Sherlock Moriarty, that's what that is. Like, oh, you think this guy's a jerk? Let me give you a supervillain instead, right? Like that, like turns the attention to, no matter how much you don't like Sherlock, he's going to fix this. So he's going to save the day. But this person really bad. This is what real bad looks like, right? Number 16, make them self-aware of how bad they are. Make them self-aware of how bad they are. We can forgive a lot, I think, if an unlikable character seems to know that they're bad, they're unlikable. Sorry, I can't hear you over the toilet flushing.
Jessica Rabbit.
Jessica Rabbit. Oh, that's right. I'm not bad. I'm just drawn this way. Yeah. I didn't know that was in there. You know how like the 80s are just in there and you're like, I didn't know I knew that. Okay, I didn't know I knew that. Like I said, I'm rewatching Elementary, so it's top of mind. So, you know, Sherlock Holmes in Elementary, he works with Detective Bell in the show. And at one point, and I wrote this down because it's like the perfect encapsulation of this. He says to Detective Bell, who gets shot at one point, like they've got a real connection. He says, "You are a good man," to Detective Bell. "I'm just a good detective." Right? So he's aware of how much trouble he is and how much he puts people through. But he can admit it. There's a little bit of just a little crack in the veneer there. Number 17, use the character's sex appeal. There's your Jessica Rabbit right there. Yeah. Use the character's sex appeal. So TV and film obviously have the upper hand here because obviously you can just cast somebody in the role who's sexy, good looking, who would never, you know, good looking people get away with murder because they could never, there's a certain goodness assigned to them that they have not earned. You can also, I mean, casting is kind of fun for TV and film because they can cast somebody that you're like, well, that person played a nun in that show I loved last year, or that person, that's a grandmotherly character from that everyone's favorite show, right? They sort of play with those things. Although, of course, when somebody big shows up on a TV show, you're like, that's the killer. right? Because what are they on the TV show? They don't need to be on that TV show. What is Meryl Streep doing on Only Murders in the Building? I was like, are they gonna make her the killer? Because what else is Meryl Streep doing on this show? No, they didn't. That's a new show. There are other bad people on that show. Don't worry about her. Never mind. But it's but because we are the writers in text form, then it's on us to figure out if we're gonna make that character sexy. How do we do that? Well, that's gonna be up to you. Like what is sexy to you? What do you think people think are sexy traits to give to a character? I will tell you that in The Death of Us, there's a character who kind of marched on stage, and I was like, what's he doing here? And then he had something to do in the story that I hadn't. This is how I write. I do not plan ahead. So someone shows up and I'm like, let's see what he's got. Well, I turned out to have a little crush on him. And I think readers are too. I've heard that really liked him. I'm like, yeah, I know you do, because I made him really sexy. There's a series of books by Tana French that I really like, the Murder Squad series. And one of the characters in that, so it's a group of people and each book has a new lead, you know, sort of like the same 6 people telling the stories, but each one gets a book. Scorcher Kennedy, I think, is the character. I don't remember which one with the one with Harbor in it, something Harbor. He's kind of a nasty character, but he's also like the sexy guy on the Murder Squad, right? Like all the ladies are sexually harassed by him probably, but you know, that kind of thing. So and also I think that's what's up with Reacher. I have not read a Reacher Lee Child book, but I think that's one of the things that people are kind of into. He's not a terrible character, right? But he's a tough one. He's a tough one. But I think he's real tall. He made him real tall. I'm like, why? I think it's because trying to make him not Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise. So Tom Cruise could play him, and everyone could complain, and then they had to do it again, right? Number 18. Oh, Hawthorne says that Reacher is basically Superman. That's funny. I haven't read the books. Are they good? They're probably good. Like, people like them, right? Lee Child is very nice. Oh, thank you, Hawthorne. He says the books are good. 18. Make the character a sin eater. Sin eater. A sin, like your deadly sins. Make them a sin eater. It's a phrase. So this is where you have placed a character in the story who is going to suck up a lot of the bad stuff that you need to have in the story, so that you can kind of protect another character. So some characters take on a lot of awful to save other characters. If your unlikable character is truly bad, you can give them a reason to be a hero, basically. Yeah. Sydney Carton, Tale of Sioux Cities. Okay. Okay, so like a double who takes the place of somebody who's going to prison. Okay. Yeah. Classic example from the Tale of Two Cities. So yeah, so somebody who's going to do something in the story to benefit someone else, and that redeems that character for us. We can see, oh, there was some good down there the whole time. Somebody else suggested at one point in the Harlan Coben series, the Bolitar series, there's a character named Wynn. Wynn. Okay, so people in the room are nodding. They've read those books. I have not, but at times like these, it occurs to me how many books I have not read, and it's sad. Yeah, so Tale of Two Cities is a great example. Okay, 19. You can just go ahead and redeem them yourself. Redeem them yourself. Or at least show potential for change. Redeem them to yourself, or at least show potential for change. So maybe they didn't have great qualities at the beginning, but could they get some? Sure, you're the author. This is not required. You do not have to redeem nasty protagonists. Sometimes your readers will expect it, and maybe you don't want to do it. It's fine. Do what you want. But if you want to save your unlikable character from the history of unlikability and this presentation for the rest of time, you can make the redemption part of the story arc. Or in some small way, you can show the unlikable character is not a lost cause. Maybe he just needed to hear the Who's in Whoville sing a song to make his heart 3 times bigger, right? There are lots of examples of characters that get redeemed in the course of the story. You might think of one. I just did the Grinch, so.
Think of the opposite.
Yaps.
Casino Royale, first Bond book.
Casino Royale in the first Bond
He
book.
falls
Okay.
in love with Vesper.
Okay.
He's thinking of resigning. Anyway, she ends up dying. And at the end of the book, he said, simply, the bitch is dead.
Oh. That doesn't sound redeemed.
No, it's it appears he's going to be redeemed into something else at the end of that book.
And then yank it out at the end. He's not. Okay. So Casino Royale. Yeah.
First
Okay.
Bond book.
First Bond book. Okay. Okay, Galveston. I mentioned this earlier, the Nick Pizzolatto book that I really like. He's got cancer. I don't want to give away the book ending, you know, it's like 20 years old, because it's a really good book and you should read it. But he does something in the course of the book that you understand he is better than he started, right? He's learned something about himself and he's better than he's. I would say also, there's a couple of books by a writer named Lou Berney, who is a friend of mine. He's a great writer. I do too many commercials for Lou Berney. Read my books. Not his. No, you can read his too. He's a great writer, fantastic writer. So he's got a book called November Road, and then his new one is called Dark Ride. Dark Ride, like a ride in a car. And they both have characters that they start out where you're like, I have to spend time with this person. But by the end, you know they are redeemed and in very interesting ways. So give him a try. Those are great books. Okay, 20, we've made it. We're here, number 20. God, will she stop talking? 20. Or don't bother redeeming them, but just give them a fantastic voice. A voice, a fantastic voice. So the term in publishing for a character that has a fantastic voice is they're voicey. I know it's a made up word, right? But that's a term you'll hear. We want a voicey character, and it just means a character that really embodies like who they are on the page. You know, it's alive. It's great to read. It's a joy to read. It's interesting, and you let them talk. You just let them talk, and that will do most of the work that you need. And my example, I'm sorry, is from my new book. The Death of Us, the narrator I said that I had to have because I needed somebody to tell part of the story that nobody else could see. That person I needed, but I needed them to be sort of arm's length distance enough that they weren't going to just spill all the secrets they had, right? So you'll have to see what I did with this person to hold them back a little bit. But then it was my job to make sure that person, who is a despicable person, is going to be fun to read anyway. So that was what my focus was for that narrator, a fantastic voice. I'm not going to read you any of it, but if you pick up the book, I do have some for sale. The very first voice that you hear is that character. Okay. I would love to answer any questions anyone has had or will have about, I'm afraid to touch this computer a little bit. Oh, somebody's typing things out. That's nice. Did anybody have a question?
Somebody asked about number 9.
Oh, okay. That's been there the whole time, huh? Okay. Just okay. I will just, I will ignore this and somebody can tell me if there's a question. Tony?
I think that the reliable narrative.
The question is, do I think the unreliable narrator is being overused as a device? Well, the word as a device, that makes me want to answer a little bit yes, because I don't love the phrase as a device. I would rather you look at your story and figure out what it needs. Like it has to have this thing, like the narrator that has to be able to tell me what happened 15 years ago, or at least part of it. He's going to be wrong about part of it, actually. But I don't think an unreliable narrator is overused generally, because most characters are unreliable narrators, whether you mean them to be or not. Especially if it's a first-person narrator, they're going to get things wrong based on who they are, what they believe, how they were raised, what they can see, what they can't see, what they, the blinders that we all have on. You're an unreliable narrator. All of us are. So even if you tried to tell me the absolute truth, you wouldn't be able to tell me the absolute truth. You know what I mean? So as a device, I think I would be leery of being like, oh, Lori says unreliable narrator. Everybody is, and just go at it like, the girl on the train is a very unreliable narrator example. But I think it can be useful, but I would do it because that's something you want to explore, how people get things wrong, or people lie to themselves, or people lie to each other. That's interesting. If that's what you want to do, I think it's the perfect device to use. If you're just looking for a fun device, then it may not be the right one. The answer?
I'm not going to say the name.
Not me.
I've now
Okay.
done it. And I started to become suspicious every time I read.
Well, I mean, that's a mystery reader being suspicious. So to catch you up, Tony's saying he's reading a particular author does it a lot. And so when you start reading her work or their work, whatever, you start looking for the unreliable narrator because it's a device they go back to over and over again. I will say, most people are unreliable. So that does fit that answer. I'll get to you in a second, Stephen. But if you're using the same tool as a writer every time, that might be a problem for you. It might be a problem for your readers, right? I mean, some people do a series and they tell the series the same way forever, and it's not a problem for their readers. It's up to you. What kind of writer do you want to be? Stephen.
Having spent 40 years in courtrooms, all stories are unreliable narrators.
We all lie a little bit. Stephen's bringing his court experience to tell us that lots of people lie. We knew that because we do it. Sometimes we do it to save people, right? Sometimes we do it to.
People have different perspectives.
Well, yeah. I mean, sometimes we're not lying. We just don't know the whole truth. John?
Oh, actually, I wanted to share.
Okay.
Jane online. Find out about your first sale.
How did I find out about my first sale? So my first sale ever was a short story, and I heard about it by receiving a letter in the mail. Remember that? Before I had email, everybody had email. It was not that long ago, but I had sent the thing out in the mail, and then I got a thing in the mail, and that's how I found out that I got my first short story sold. My first novel, The Black Hour, I heard about it through my agent. So I heard about my agent through email, and then she wanted a phone call. So I talked to her on the phone. And if they want a phone call with you, it just means they want to work with you. They've already decided they want to work with you. Your job is to just not be batshit crazy. Okay, that's what they're testing for on the phone. They already liked the book, or they wouldn't talk to you on the phone at all. So I talked to my agent on the phone in the parking lot outside of work, because I worked full time at the time. And then when she sold my first book, I found out about it on email. while it was at work. Like I got it to my Gmail account, but I had that open on my work desk. So instead of calling my husband right away, which you think I would do, I ran around in my office and I told my coworker. My husband is still a little salty about that I told her first, but she was right there and he was at work and he works all the time. So it's hard to get the attention. Is that what you meant? Yeah. Okay. John.
So, my question is, how do you feel with character development through chapters, on multiple guilty characters? Going back to the unlikely, I'm finishing up a project like one of the characters, but I like to dwell in why he's unlikely. And the other, there are 5 guilty characters.
Okay.
Probably going to be about 75 page work. There are varying levels of likability based upon who they are and their tragedies and such, but they're all interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that as a means, necessarily a device,
Yeah.
means of dealing with unlikable characters?
Yeah, I mean, so John's question is basically how do I feel about multiple point of view characters telling a story. He's got 5 in his book that he's working on, and at least one of them, varying levels of likability. One of them is pretty unlikable, it sounds like, but and then you do dive into why he's unlikable, what made him that way. I absolutely love that kind of story. I write that kind of story. It's interesting to me. I think 5 characters is a lot. I would make sure that all of those characters are necessary. As your first time novelist, maybe? No, okay, no.
Full-length novel.
Okay, so you're along in the process. So you've got some skill. So I think it just takes skill. And if you're a first time writer, it would be, I think, a lot to ask of that skill. Now, that being said, I did do that for my first book. Did 2. And they were both first person. I don't advise that. But if you've got this, it's going to take skill, right? Because you've got a lot of layers and a lot of interactions and a lot of, secrets held, and this person knows and this person doesn't. And I think it's really interesting. You want to make sure that it doesn't distract from the story, but that it is telling the story the way you want it told. But if it's the way you want it told, then sounds great. I'd read that.
Well, when it's finished, I'll let you know.
Okay, you let me know. Are there other questions of any type whatsoever? Yes, Tony. Yes, I will sign your book.
Me too.
Okay, got some books to sign in the room. No other questions? Oh. You can buy a book at the back of the room after I am done with all the questions. Did anybody at home have a question about anything? Thank you, Jane, for the question about my first sale. Okay, I trust you. Have I already started working on my next novel? I have. Sometimes, what? I will share a little bit. So, so The Death Bus just came out October 3rd. Ideally, you would have, some traction on the next thing. I don't know that I've had as much traction as I should. But in 2020, I had finished rewriting my book before this one, Death at Greenway. I wrote it from the ground up again. I think I've even had a chance to tell you guys about it at one point or another. And I needed a break, so I took a break. But at the end of the year, I was still the national president of Sisters in Crime, your pandemic president. Great year to be in charge of stuff. I had to cancel, lots of travel that I had set up, all that stuff. If you guys are missing stuff from the list, I can help you afterward. I can hear talking. If you miss something, I can help you afterward with what you're missing. Oh, and there's a recording, that's true. So I had a break after Death of Greenway because I needed a break. That book took a lot of skin with it. And then I had the breast cancer diagnosis. So I took another break. And I started writing something new, basically out of stubbornness, because I didn't want the cancer to take a book from me. I didn't want Sisters in Crime National Presidency to take a book, and I didn't want cancer to take a book. So just mostly stubbornness. So I started writing something. I got about 50 pages of it. Actually, I'm jumping ahead. Back in 2020, Sisters in Crime was a national sponsor of NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month. And we are again. I saw some things happening. So if you guys are in the mood to do a lot of writing in November, get geared up. They're doing a lot of programs, lots of write-ins, things like that. So I got us involved in that. That was the first year that we were going to do that because I wasn't going anywhere. We weren't doing any events publicly. We needed to do as much online stuff as possible, but we wanted to get in front of new writers to get membership bolstered a little bit. So I got us involved in that. We spent a lot of money on it, being sponsors of the National Novel Writing Month organization, but I had never done NaNoWriMo, ever. And so I thought, well, I can't be the president up here telling all you guys to do this insane 50,000 words in a month project. Yeah, you should do that. And then I'm not doing it. I'm not trying. So I decided to give it a shot. And but I wasn't writing a book. I didn't have a book in mind. I just thought, okay. I just need something really quickly that I can start on Monday, because this is like Thursday and I need to start something on Monday because it's November 1st. Okay, well, I just, it's 2020. You remember where we all were headspace wise in 2020, way back in the day. I just needed some joy. Also, some things that happened in my life. I needed some joy. Let's just leave it there. I needed some joy. So I thought, well, I'm just going to shove everything I love, everything that's making me happy right now into this book, this thing that's not even going to be a book. I'm not really writing this book. I'm just going to write some stuff for a while, see how it goes. So I put country music. So I was just really vibing on some country music. Dogs. I love dogs. I don't usually put dogs in my books because then you have to take care of the dog. And then you have to worry about the dogs. So I don't usually put dogs in. So put some dogs in. Beer. Not yet. It's in Chicago. That's where I live. I love the city. So put some Chicago in there. And something else. Oh, cereal. I was doing some low carb. Great timing, Lori. Let's be on a diet in a pandemic. Cereal. So I dropped some cereal in there. There's a cereal restaurant in Chicago for a long time. And so I put a Chicago cereal restaurant in my thing that it's not a book. So it was just to get me writing on something. And I didn't do very well. I did about 15,000 words. And then I had to give up because November, I think, is a terrible month to try to write that much. But I was trying, and what I got was 15,000 words and a lot of joy. So that was enough. That was fine. And I put it away because it was never going to be a book. And I just started writing something new. And then the new thing that I started writing was what I was working on when I got the breast cancer diagnosis. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this. So I do 50 pages, send it to my agent. HarperCollins offered on that book. At which point I realized this is a really dark. This is a really light story that I'm writing. This new thing, the thing that's in between the cereal and Death of Us, and I just wasn't feeling it. There was something about it that just wasn't singing to me. So I told my editor, I don't think this is the book actually that I want to write right now. She offered me money for it. You don't even want to know how much. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to write this story after all. Maybe not ever. And she's like, okay, well, send me, what do you want to write? I sent her 2 paragraphs. 1 paragraph about one book and 1 paragraph about another book that I might want to write. And she picked one and I started writing. And it is The Death of Us. That is not how it's supposed to go. The thing that I take from that is that I am very lucky in some ways because my editor likes my work enough that she only needed a paragraph to know that she wanted to read this book. If you can pull it off, right? That's you sent me a paragraph. I haven't read any pages. I would read that book. That sounds interesting to me. I'm like, well, let's see if I can do it, right? Let's see if it's about a submerged car found in a quarry. And I had just heard a story in real life about a submerged car being found. A woman had gone missing, but her boyfriend slash husband, whatever, was in jail for her disappearance. And they could tell from this accident, it was an accident. She had just driven off the road. So I need to follow up on that and see what happened to that guy. Hopefully he exonerated. But I heard that story and I thought, you know, that narrative, that boyfriend did it, that husband did it. I mean, guys, I'm sorry, that's like 89% true, but it's not always true. And that idea that the narrative leaps ahead of what we can possibly know, and we all do it. That was what was interesting to me. And that's the part that my editor was like, well, if you can pull it off, I'm like, okay, it's in there. So that is what happened to that. But okay, all that to tell you that a few, like, okay, when was BoucherCon? BoucherCon was August, so late August, so mid-August. I was like, oh, I need to figure out what I'm writing next. The book's coming out in October. I haven't started anything. I need to figure out what I'm going to write next. Because it's just, you know, mystery is a book a year type thing. It doesn't have to be, but it kind of is. And you don't want to be gone too long. And so I decided I'll just look to see if I got anything in here that's interesting to me. I have a list, I have a doc with all my like 17 to 20 ideas. And I'm like, oh, maybe some of these. And then I also had this document of 50 pages, 15,000 words about country music in Chicago with dogs and cereal and beer. And I read it thinking, oh, to see what, oh, I actually fell in love with the character. So I was like, fluff this up, like actually I cut it down and I sent it to my agent and she's like, what is this? What is this? What's happening? I'm like, oh, I wrote this in 2020 and I think I kind of love it. She's like, I love it. So I'm writing that. At the moment, I'm calling it 3 chords suite. It's hard to say though, so we'll see how that, it won't last. Harper will rename it, I'm sure. And then try to put a mountain on the cover as they did with this book set in Indiana. There's supposed to be a mountain right there. I had him take it out. Any other questions come in while I was yapping away?
No.
No?
Everybody, but you're getting free.
Oh, thank you.
Best talk ever. This has been great. Thank you. Excellent.
Oh, thank you. Thanks everybody who's watching. I can't wait to read the serial. Thank you. It is not a serial as I do not write series books, but thank you. Yeah, Bridget. As an X or 360. All right, let's see if I can find the paragraph real quick. I'm going to read the paragraph that I had. Well, I understand. I do.
So your next book is not going to be about a
Serial killer. It's going to be a serial killer. It is not going to be a serial killer.
It'll be really sudden.
Okay, now we're in it. We are down in it now. We've got soggy plot. I think Janet's in her element with the puns over here. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but the serial puns are going fast and loose in here. I am not going to be able to find this. I think.
You guys have seen serial stories, right?
Oh, everywhere.
I don't think cozy.
Like the wholesale where you turn the thing and you, yeah. Tony wants to write a serial store cozy mystery.
Think of the great puns you could do that. The pun type.
I don't want to give Tony's ideas away because somebody out there might steal it.
All right.
Yeah. If you really want to write it. Okay, I found the paragraph. This is the paragraph that I sent to my editor. One of two. Okay. 20 plus years ago, I actually changed it to 15. 20 plus years ago, a local woman went missing from a small Midwestern town along with her young child. I took that out, and her boyfriend's car. No trace of her was found. Many hope that she got away. In the absence of a body, the boyfriend is persecuted by the town until the skeletons are found submerged in a lake 2 decades later, an accidental death. Now the town must reckon with the things they have done and said when they thought one of their own was a murderer. What did they do? Who did they become in the meantime? And what crimes are they guilty of? So that's all relevant, except I changed the timeline, and I actually did have a conversation with my editor about whether the children were in the car. A whole, like you can imagine, right? I was like writing this thing and I'm like, oh, this makes the story suck so hard. The kids died. I'm like, I think I'm going to take the kids out. No dead kids. She's like, no dead kids. So no dead kids. We decided against the dead kids. Really?
Yeah, Vanished in Vermilion.
Vanished in Vermilion by
Lou Ragoose.
Lou Ragoose.
Said it, I think, and two girls had set out senior class party in a gravel pit. With the kids in it, in this small town, in North Dakota, where you go for a big time to go to a gravel pit. Very early. And they ended up missing. And it takes 40 years before a farmer plowing a field, you can look down into the riverbed and see this 63 Studebaker that they were driving.
Yeah.
And he sees the sticking out of the mud.
Mm-hmm.
His belly washer a few days earlier. Anyone in prison for it?
I heard the story that was current where they found the car this woman had disappeared in, and it just looked, okay, this is an accident. This guy's in prison for no reason whatsoever. I had never heard of that one. Okay, I'll look it up. Vanished in Vermilion. Okay, I will look that up. Was there another question? I feel like I was getting through that for something else. Nope. Okay. Oh, how, Bridget? How do I turn a paragraph into a novel? Well, okay, so I think I've done talks for you guys before where I talk about how I write, and it's very haphazard. It is not a path I would send you on, ideally, but it's what works for me. And the reason why it works for me is because I like the discovery part of writing, when you're writing and you don't know where you're going and what you're doing, and something kind of rises up and makes sense to you and feels right. And then you just go in that direction. So for this, I always kind of start from, where can I start from? When I have a paragraph, okay, well, I'm going to need a character who disappears, but I'm going to need somebody who is going to be persecuted for that. And I'm going to need, neither one of them is going to be the main character, right? Because she's dead and he's, okay. So I just start building out from there. I decided I wanted sort of an every woman type character. I decided not to send the children off the cliff into the water. That was a good decision, I think. But I thought, but there could be a child and that I left behind, and that could be interesting. Who raises that child? So this is where the main character comes from. Liz is the person, Lisette, who, she opens the door and there's a woman. It's the rival for her husband's affections. This is the child they have together. He's not there. She places the kid in the main character's hands and says, watch him for an hour, I'll be back. And so she's off in the night. She never comes back. And the story sort of wrapped up very quickly back then because the guy who she was dating, everyone just assumes he's the guy, right? He's the guy. But there are reasons why he's not around to answer for that, and we need to feel sorry for him. So that's a sub-story. So I would just start with that. Okay, where can I start? I've got a woman who's raised a child that is not hers biologically, but she's raised him. Okay, how old? Well, 15 is a terrible age for teenagers. That sounds like a good conflict-ridden age to have that kid be. So, okay, 15 years ago, this happened. Where do we start? The car needs to be found. I know that. I mean, maybe it's not the first scene. Maybe there's something that happens before that. So I actually have the kid discover the car himself, which is a nasty turn. You're welcome. But he texts his mom and says, "Don't freak out." And her boss is like, "Yeah, like that's worked for any mom ever, right?" And he's been in a car accident out near their house. And while they're waiting for like, help with that, he goes to an angle that no one else has been on and looks down and sees like something. And he's a car man because of his grandpa. So that's where I started, that text. Okay, so what is she doing? What do I want her to be doing when I first introduce the main character? That's the thing to consider when you're writing a protagonist. What are they doing when you first meet them? She's at work. She's got this weird kind of in-between job at the school. And she's actually snooping on the student records, which she shouldn't be doing. So that's an insight into her character. So that's where I started with the text, and then she's snooping, and then the conversation she and her son start, and then you're just off to the races. I revise a lot at the end. I revise as I go, and then I revise a lot at the end. I get to the point where I'm like, why don't I just plot this out? You know why I don't? Because I don't think it would work for me. I don't think that I would do, like Jeffrey Deaver does, 6 months, 200 pages of outline and then puts it aside. He's proud of it too. I think it sounds like mental illness, but that is how he does it. Good for him. I think it's just a real rough draft in his case, right? And he puts it out, he types it out again. Great. I don't think I would go back into it if I had done that amount of work. It would not be interesting to me, and I would not do it. There's a lot of great TV out there. That's what I would do instead. So for me, it's trying to figure out what the story is, and then, but I have to write it to find out. I'm not a good like oral storyteller. I couldn't just be like, hey, let me tell you a story, just to make it up on the spot. That's not who I am. I have to like feel it through my fingers, and either writing it. I have a notebook in my purse back there now, and keep a Word document with notes to myself, but also my notebook, and I write on my laptop most of the time. And when I get stuck, I go to the notebook and I do things there because it feels more casual and less, when you type out sentences, it feels like, oh, those are good sentences. I don't want to ruin those, but you might actually have to break those sentences to make your book better. So if I'm really stuck, I go to the notebook, and I can mess up a notebook and not feel bad about it. Yeah. Okay. Yes, a pantser. That's okay. So how do I? How long did it take me to get from that paragraph to knowing where the story was going to go, or done? Okay, before revision. So I wrote this draft in 5 months. That is the fastest draft I've ever done. I can only tell you it's probably because I was no longer the national president of Sisters in Crime, that I was getting a lot more work done, a lot more time to stay in the story, and that's probably what it was. I wasn't in charge of it. I also really set, because I had that 50 pages, and then that's what they were going to buy. And so I was getting kind of a late start. When she bought this book, there was not a lot of it. That's a nervous position to be in, right? So I wanted to catch up as quickly as I could. So I set a goal of doing 1,500 words a day, 5 days a week, which is a lot, but I'm a full-time writer. So I do have the time. Do I have the discipline? Is a different question. I have to build it every time. So that's what I did as well as I could. And I did pretty well with that. And one of the ways I figured out to do well with that, to get in more days than not, was I started reading, just for inspiration, I started rereading Bird by Bird, which is fantastic writing. It's not like a how-to, it's more like a companion, like holds your hand as you go along. Like, yes, you're doing something insane. We're all insane. Do it anyway. That kind of how-to book. And I just love it. I think I've read it like probably 9 or 10 times. Like when I started keeping track, I've read it 7 times since I started keeping track, how many times I've read it. So I just started reading that a little bit, but while I was reading, I would get this little like itchy feeling. I always make this little itchy feeling that I wanted to be writing. While I'm reading her, she's reminding me, oh yeah, it's really great. It is fun. Oh, it's so rewarding. You know, she's reminding me that I love to write. And so I would get that feeling and I'm like, what am I doing? Put the book down, go write. And that's how I started getting into the writing every day. I'd read a little bit until I got that feeling and then I would put it down and write. And that's how I got to the writing page a little faster. So I can put off the writing page all day. That's what full-time writer means. You can put it off all day. Yeah.
Day, 5 days a week.
Yeah. 1,500 words a day, 5 days a week.
That's what I've been doing. It's been between 1,200 and 1,500 words a day.
Yeah.
In the evening, because I work a full-time job.
Yeah.
5 to 6, sometimes 7 days.
I know somebody who does 2,000. Well, I know a lot of people who do 2,000 words a day. I will do 1,500 as the goal, but if I'm still having a good time, we just keep going, right? But I know a lot of people who do 2,000 words a day. It's a lot. It's not impossible, even if you're working a full-time job.
Right.
It's hard though. You have to set the time, make that time available to yourself, and it's hard to do. I know people who do it in the morning before they start their day job. I know people who they get to the end of the day and they haven't done it. Well, they just do it, you know, and then they go to bed, that kind of thing. But I know somebody who does 2,000 words a day every day. Every day. She takes a week off at Christmas. Slothful. And she takes a week off in the summer. I can't remember which week it is and why, but she writes like 3 books a year. This is a mystery writer. Her name is Katrina McPherson. She's a fantastic writer. So even if you wanted to hate her for writing 3 books a year, they're fantastic. So you kind of hate her a little bit more. She's a delightful Scottish woman whose accent, oh, I should have give them an accent, right? They can't be villains if they've got an accent. They can't all be bad if they sound like Katrina McPherson. Yeah, so you get it done however you get it done, but that's how I got it done. 5 months for the draft, and then I don't remember exactly how long, but at one point I really was like deeply into edits, to the point of like frustration with myself. Like, why am I doing this to myself? And my editor's like, you make every project a challenge, Lori, my editor said. I'm like, put that on a little pillow and put it on my couch. Doesn't help me whatsoever. Yeah, I do make every project a challenge, but I think writing is a challenge, and it's the sort of thing that you learn a lot about yourself while you're doing it. Writing is its own reward. You know, I taught myself by writing Death at Greenway, my historical, the one I wrote from the ground up twice, that I could do hard things. And then I very quickly, after that book came out, had to go through hard things. So I taught myself something about myself that I didn't know, and it was worth the whole shebang. Any last questions? It's 2. I think we said noon to 2, and you guys have been so patient and probably have to pee and flush that toilet. So I want to let you do that. I will have books in the back if anybody wants to buy one and sign them. If you brought them from somewhere else, that's also fine. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everybody who is watching at home. Thank you to the board for inviting me. And that retreat sounded pretty good. So, you know, let me know.